The door slammed behind me so hard the windows rattled. I stood there on the front porch in my thin cotton nightgown, barefoot, watching my breath form clouds in the freezing December air. Through the glass, I could see my husband Kevin already walking away, not even looking back. "Kevin, please," I called out, my voice cracking. "It's 20 degrees out here. At least let me get my coat." He turned around, his face twisted with contempt. "You should have thought about that before you went through my phone. You want to play detective? Go detect yourself somewhere else. Go to your sister's house." "Oh wait, she doesn't want you either, does she?" The lock clicked. The porch light went off, leaving me in darkness. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering violently. My phone was inside. My purse was inside. Everything I owned was inside that house, and my husband of 12 years had just thrown me out like yesterday's garbage. All because I had seen one text message. One text that said, "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. The hotel room is already booked." When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He laughed. He said I should be grateful he stayed with me this long, that I had let myself go, that I was boring and useless, that I hadn't worked in 8 years and had no right to question anything he did. Then he grabbed my arm, dragged me to the door, and threw me out. I stumbled down the porch steps, my feet burning against the frozen concrete. Where could I go? My sister had made it clear last Thanksgiving that she was tired of hearing about my marriage problems. My parents lived 3 states away. I had no friends left because Kevin had slowly isolated me from everyone over the years. I was 42 years old, standing in my nightgown in the middle of winter, with nowhere to go and no one to call. That's when the porch light next door turned on. I had seen my neighbor before. An elegant black woman who looked to be in her 70s, always impeccably dressed, always driving a beautiful Mercedes. We had exchanged waves a few times, but Kevin discouraged me from talking to the neighbors. He said they were nosy and beneath us. The woman stepped out onto her porch, pulling a thick cardigan around her shoulders. "Child, what on earth are you doing out here dressed like that?" I opened my mouth to make an excuse, to say I was fine, to protect Kevin's reputation like I had been trained to do. But instead, I burst into tears. "My husband," I managed to say between sobs. "He locked me out." The woman's eyes narrowed. She looked at my house, then back at me. Something shifted in her expression. "Come inside," she said firmly, "right now, before you catch pneumonia." I hesitated. Kevin would be furious if he found out I had talked to the neighbors about our business. "Sweetheart, I'm not asking," she said. "I'm telling. Get yourself inside my house this instant." Something about her tone reminded me of my grandmother, the one person who had always made me feel safe. I found myself walking toward her porch, my frozen feet screaming with every step. She wrapped an arm around me and guided me through her front door into warmth. The house smelled like lavender and fresh coffee. It was beautifully decorated, with African art on the walls and family photos everywhere. "Sit down," she said, pointing to a plush sofa near the fireplace. She disappeared and came back with a thick blanket, which she wrapped around my shoulders. "I'm going to make you some tea. Don't you move." I sat there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. My whole life had fallen apart in the span of 15 minutes. The woman returned with a steaming cup and pressed it into my hands. Then she sat across from me, her dark eyes studying my face. "Now," she said, "tell me everything." I don't know why I did. Maybe it was the shock, or the cold, or the fact that I had been keeping secrets for so long that they were poisoning me from the inside. But I told her everything. I told her about meeting Kevin when I was 30, how charming and attentive he had been, how he had convinced me to quit my job as a hospital administrator because he made enough money for both of us, how the criticism started small and grew bigger, how he controlled the finances, the social calendar, even what I wore, how I had slowly become a ghost in my own life. And I told her about tonight, about finding the text, about the other woman, about being thrown out like trash. When I finished, the woman was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. "What's your husband's name, honey?" "Kevin. Kevin Marshall." Her eyebrows rose. "Kevin Marshall, who works at Whitfield Medical Group?" I blinked. "Yes, he's the chief financial officer there. How did you know?" The woman leaned back in her chair. and a small smile crossed her face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been handed an unexpected gift. "My name is Evelyn Whitfield," she said. "My late husband founded that company 50 years ago. My son James is the CEO, which means your husband works for my family." I felt the blood drain from my face. Of all the neighbors in all the houses in Atlanta, I had ended up next door to the matriarch of my husband's company. "Mrs. Whitfield, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to burden you with my personal problems. Kevin would be mortified if he knew I was here. Please, just forget everything I said." I started to stand, but she held up her hand. "Sit down, child. I'm not finished." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I've been watching your house for 3 years now. I've seen how that man treats you. I've heard him yelling through the walls. I've watched you shrink smaller and smaller every year." My face burned with shame. I thought we had hidden it so well. "There's nothing to be embarrassed about," she continued. "I was married to a difficult man myself for 40 years. I know how it works. I know how they make you feel like everything is your fault. I know how they isolate you until you have no one left." Tears spilled down my cheeks again. "But here's what I also know," she said, leaning forward. "You are not alone anymore. You're going to stay here tonight, and tomorrow we're going to figure this out together. And I promise you this. If your husband is the kind of man who throws his wife out in the cold, he's probably the kind of man who has other secrets, and I intend to find out what they are." I stayed with Mrs. Whitfield that night in a beautiful guest room with silk sheets and a bathroom bigger than my old bedroom. I barely slept, my mind racing with fear and shame and a tiny, unfamiliar feeling that I would later recognize as hope. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Mrs. Whitfield already dressed in a cream-colored suit, drinking coffee at the kitchen table. Across from her sat a younger woman with the same elegant features. "This is my daughter Patricia," Mrs. Whitfield said. "She's an attorney. I've already told her everything." Patricia looked at me with kind but serious eyes. "Mrs. Marshall, I specialize in family law. Before we do anything else, I need to ask you a few questions. Do you have any money of your own?" "No," I admitted. "Kevin controls all our accounts. I have a credit card, but it's in his name. Do you have access to any financial documents, tax returns, bank statements, anything?" "Some. I used to handle the household bills before Kevin took over. I might still have some old statements in my filing cabinet." Patricia nodded. "Good. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here where you're safe. I'm going to file an emergency protective order today based on what happened last night. That will allow us to get you back into the house to retrieve your belongings and important documents." My head was spinning. "But Kevin will be so angry. He'll make my life a living hell." "Sweetheart," Mrs. Whitfield said gently, "your life is already a living hell. The only difference is that now you're going to do something about it." I thought about the text on Kevin's phone. I thought about all the late nights at work that probably weren't work at all. I thought about the way he had looked at me when he pushed me out the door, like I was nothing. "Okay," I said. "What do I need to do?" The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. Patricia filed the protective order, and a sheriff's deputy escorted me back to the house to collect my things while Kevin was at work. I took my clothes, my grandmother's jewelry, and most importantly, the filing cabinet full of documents that Kevin thought I had forgotten about. Mrs. Whitfield insisted I stay in her guest room. She refused to take any money, which was good because I didn't have any, but she did put me to work, saying she needed help organizing a charity gala she was hosting in January. It was during this work that I discovered something unexpected. I was in Mrs. Whitfield's home office, entering guest information into a spreadsheet, when I noticed a folder on her desk labeled Whitfield Medical Group, Annual Audit. I shouldn't have looked, I know that, but something made me open it. And there, buried in pages of numbers, I found it. Discrepancies, large sums of money that didn't add up, payments to vendors that didn't seem to exist. My hospital administration background came flooding back. I had spent 10 years reviewing medical billing before I married Kevin. I knew what financial irregularities looked like, and these looked very, very wrong. I spent the next 3 hours going through every page of that audit, making notes, cross-referencing numbers. By the time I was done, my hands were shaking. Someone was stealing from Whitfield Medical Group hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past 3 years, and all the fraudulent transactions traced back to one department: finance, Kevin's department. I sat back in my chair, my mind reeling. My husband wasn't just a cheater and an abuser, he was also a thief. When Mrs. Whitfield came home that evening, I showed her everything. Her face went from curious to shocked to absolutely furious as I walked her through the evidence. "That snake," she said quietly, "that absolute snake. He's been stealing from my family's company right under our noses." "I could be wrong," I said quickly. "I'm not a forensic accountant. These are just patterns I noticed." "You're not wrong." Mrs. Whitfield picked up her phone. "I've had suspicions for months. The board has been asking questions about why our margins keep shrinking while revenue grows. Kevin always had explanations. Budget overruns, market conditions, unexpected expenses." She laughed bitterly. Unexpected expenses, indeed. She made a call, speaking in a low, urgent voice. When she hung up, she looked at me with new respect. "My son is bringing in a forensic accounting team first thing tomorrow. But I want you to work with them. You found this, you understand it. And quite frankly, I trust you more than I trust anyone on that board right now." For the first time in years, I felt useful, competent, like the woman I used to be before Kevin convinced me I was nothing without him. Over the next few weeks, I worked with the investigators to trace every fraudulent transaction. It was worse than I had imagined. Kevin hadn't just been stealing money. He had created an entire network of fake vendors, shell companies, and falsified invoices. The total amount missing was over $2 million. And he hadn't been working alone. His assistant, a woman named Brittany, had helped him set up the scheme. The same Brittany who, according to the hotel records we subpoenaed, had been traveling with Kevin to conferences for the past 2 years. The same Brittany who was the one sending him those text messages. They weren't just having an affair. They were partners in crime. While I worked on uncovering Kevin's fraud, Patricia worked on my divorce. She had frozen all our joint accounts, which sent Kevin into a rage. He showed up at Mrs. Whitfield's house one night, pounding on the door, screaming that I was a thief and a liar and that I would regret this. Mrs. Whitfield called the police. Kevin was escorted away with a warning that if he came back, he would be arrested for violating the protective order. But the worst part came when I tried to reach out to my family. I called my sister Diane, hoping that now that I had left Kevin, she would support me. Instead, she told me that Kevin had already called her. He said I had been having an affair, that I had stolen money from him, that I was mentally unstable and making up stories. "He seemed so sincere," Diane said. "And honestly, Monica, you've always been a little dramatic. Remember when you accused Mom's boyfriend of being controlling and he turned out to be perfectly nice?" "He wasn't nice," I said, my voice breaking. "He was hitting her. She just hid it well." "See, there you go again. Making everything into a crisis." Diane sighed. "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of your marriage problems. Figure it out and let me know when you've calmed down." She hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling more alone than ever. Kevin had gotten to my family before I could. He had painted me as the crazy one, the liar, the villain of the story, and they believed him. I cried that night. Mrs. Whitfield held me like my own mother never had, and told me that blood doesn't make family. Loyalty does, love does. And the people who couldn't see the truth didn't deserve my tears. January arrived, and with it, the annual Whitfield Medical Group Gala. It was the social event of the season, a black tie affair attended by everyone who was anyone in Atlanta's medical and business community. It was also the night everything would change. I wasn't planning to attend. I was nobody, just the ex-wife of a man about to be exposed as a criminal. But Mrs. Whitfield insisted. "You uncovered this fraud," she said. "You saved my family's company from bleeding out. You deserve to be there when justice is served." She took me shopping and bought me a stunning emerald green gown that made me feel beautiful for the first time in years. Patricia did my makeup and told me I looked like a movie star. The gala was held at the Atlanta History Center, a gorgeous venue with soaring ceilings and elegant gardens. I walked in on Mrs. Whitfield's arm, my heart pounding. Somewhere in this crowd was Kevin. He didn't know yet that I knew about the fraud. He didn't know that tonight, his entire world was about to collapse. I spotted him across the room, laughing and shaking hands with board members, playing the part of the successful executive. Brittany was there too, wearing a red dress and hanging on his arm like she belonged there. Like she was already his wife. The sight of them together sent a spike of pain through my chest, but underneath the pain was something else. Something cold and hard and patient. Justice was coming. The program began with the usual speeches. James Whitfield, Mrs. Whitfield's son and the CEO, talked about the company's achievements over the past year. He thanked the employees, the board, the community. Then he said something unexpected. Before we continue with tonight's festivities, I need to address a serious matter. Over the past month, we have uncovered evidence of significant financial fraud within our organization. Someone we trusted has been stealing from this company, from your retirement funds, from the patients we serve. The room went silent. I saw Kevin's face go pale. I want to thank the person who brought this to our attention, James continued. A woman who showed more integrity and courage than anyone I have ever met. Monica Marshall, would you please join me on stage? Every eye in the room turned to me. I felt Mrs. Whitfield squeeze my hand, and then I was walking toward the stage on legs that felt like jelly. James handed me the microphone. I looked out at the crowd, at all those wealthy, powerful people staring at me, and I looked at Kevin, whose face had gone from pale to absolutely terrified. 3 weeks ago, I said, my voice steady, my husband threw me out of our house in the middle of the night. I was wearing nothing but my nightgown. I had no money, no phone, nowhere to go. I thought my life was over. I could see Kevin trying to move toward the exit, but 2 men in suits had quietly positioned themselves by the doors. What I didn't know, I continued, was that this was the beginning of a new life, a better life. Because when I had nothing left to lose, I finally found the courage to see the truth, and the truth was that my husband, Kevin Marshall, your chief financial officer, has been stealing from this company for 3 years. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Kevin's face was purple with rage. "She's lying!" he shouted. "She's crazy! This is revenge because I asked for a divorce!" James Whitfield stepped forward. "Mr. Marshall, we have documentation of over $2 million in fraudulent transactions. We have traced the shell companies, the fake vendors, the offshore accounts. We have evidence of your affair with your assistant Brittany Chen, who helped you execute this scheme. The FBI has been notified, and I believe they're waiting to speak with you outside." Kevin lunged toward me, his face twisted with hatred. But he only made it 3 steps before security grabbed him, pinning his arms behind his back. "You stupid woman!" he screamed as they dragged him away. "You've ruined everything. I made you. You were nothing before me. You'll always be nothing." I watched him go, waiting for the pain, the fear, the shame that his words had always triggered. But I felt nothing except a profound sense of peace. "I was something before you," I said quietly, though I doubt he heard me. I just forgot for a while. The rest of the evening was a blur of congratulations and support. People I had never met told me I was brave. Board members thanked me for saving the company. Mrs. Whitfield beamed like a proud mother. But the moment that meant the most came later, when my phone rang with an unknown number. It was my sister Diane. "I saw the news," she said, her voice small. "Monica, I am so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have known that Kevin was the liar, not you. Can you ever forgive me?" I thought about all the years of dismissal, the eye rolls, the lectures about being too dramatic. I thought about how alone I had felt when no one in my family believed me. "I forgive you," I said finally. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was before. I'm never going to let anyone make me feel small again. Not Kevin, not you, not anyone." There was a long pause. "I understand," Diane said. "And Monica? I'm proud of you." Those 4 words meant more than I could say. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of Whitfield Medical Group, wearing a tailored navy suit and carrying a briefcase full of plans and projections. The nameplate on my door read Monica Reynolds, Director of Financial Compliance. Yes, Reynolds, I had taken back my maiden name, It felt like coming home. Mrs. Whitfield had insisted on creating the position just for me. "You saved this company," she said. "Now I want you to protect it. Make sure no one ever steals from us again." I threw myself into the work with an energy I hadn't felt in years. I built a team, implemented new controls, created systems to catch fraud before it could spread. And every day, I walked into that building knowing that I belonged there because of what I could do, not because of who I was married to. Kevin pleaded guilty to fraud charges and was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Brittany got 3 years. Their offshore accounts were seized, and a significant portion of the recovered funds went into a scholarship program for women returning to the workforce after leaving abusive relationships. That last part was my idea. Mrs. Whitfield made it happen. I still live next door to Mrs. Whitfield. Sometimes in the evenings, we sit on her porch and drink tea and talk about life. She tells me stories about her husband, about building the company, about the hard times and the good times. I tell her about my plans, my dreams, the future I'm finally building for myself. "You know," she said to me recently, "that night when I saw you standing in the cold, I almost didn't come outside. I thought it wasn't my business, that you would think I was interfering. What made you change your mind?" She smiled. I remembered my grandmother telling me something when I was young. She said, "Evelyn, there are 2 kinds of people in this world, the ones who look away from suffering and the ones who reach out their hand." I decided a long time ago which kind I wanted to be. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "I'm glad you reached out." "So am I, child. So am I." Sometimes I think about the woman I was 3 years ago. The one who was so beaten down that she believed she deserved to be thrown out like garbage. The one who thought she had no value outside of being someone's wife. That woman feels like a stranger now, like someone I knew briefly a long time ago. I am Monica Reynolds. I am 45 years old. I am a survivor, a professional, a friend, and someday maybe a mentor to other women finding their way out of darkness. I am not nothing. I never was. And if my story touches anyone out there who is going through something similar, I want you to know this. The people who try to make you small are afraid of how big you can become. The people who isolate you know that connection will give you strength. The people who tell you that you're nothing are terrified of what you'll do when you realize you're everything. You are not alone. You are not worthless. You are not stuck forever. Sometimes the worst night of your life leads to the best chapter of your life. Sometimes the neighbor who sees you at your lowest becomes the family you never knew you needed. Sometimes hitting rock bottom is just the foundation for building something beautiful. Don't give up. The world needs your story. And when you're ready to tell it, I'll be listening. Thank you for being here with me today. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to know. Leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and remember, you're stronger than you know. This is Martha's Stories. I'll see you in the next one.